Everybody. Welcome back to the CLEAResult Energy Forum 2020. Thank you for coming back and joining us in this next session, which is going to be on strategic energy management. We're going to focus on expanding and amplifying the impact of SEM. And I'm going to be talking about SEM for communities and SEM for multifamily. My co-presenter, Avery Dunsmore from SEMCO, will be joining me a little bit later. She's here to talk about the community aspect of this session, and I'm going to start out by talking about the multifamily. My name is Keri Macklin. I am the Senior Director of Strategic Energy Management at CLEAResult. That means that I oversee all of the strategic energy management programs that we have across North America. And I've been doing strategic energy management for over a decade now, and it's been a wild, exciting ride, and now I'm excited to talk about what's next. What is the what's next for SEM? How do we expand? How do we amplify? So I'm going to talk really quickly about what SEM is, and just from a philosophical standpoint, strategic energy management is a long-term approach to energy efficiency. It includes a very structured program that includes setting goals, tracking progress, reporting results. We help organizations create successful SEM plans. They build long-term relationships with the energy users and also create energy savings from behavioral changes, low, no-cost changes. It's a way to interact with participants and get a real impact through behavioral operations and maintenance changes. So I am going to do, before we go there, I am going to do a really quick 1-minute history of SEM. This slide is actually automatic and it's going to go for a minute. So we'll see how we do. I'm going to do it as fast as I can. So starting in 2009, we had the first SEM cohort launched, and it was focused on industrial participants. So we had 11 industrial participants in that cohort. Fast forward to 2014, and we introduced it to commercial customers. So SEM started working with commercial customers, and by 2016, CEE found that 324 gigawatts and 9 million therms were saved through SEM programs across North America. In 2017, California actually launched SEM statewide. It was the first state that all the major utilities launched strategic energy management. And then in 2020, we find through a ACEEE study that 31 of the 52 largest U.S. electric utilities offer SEM to commercial and industrial customers. So there it is, 1-minute history of the decade of SEM for now. And now I want to talk about what's next. So as you saw in that other timeline, we went from industrial, which the program was very focused on industrial. We branched out to commercial. And now we want to think about the next frontier, which I think is multifamily SEM, and then also moving into community SEM. So I'm going to talk first about multifamily. This is an exciting new frontier for SEM. And when we were thinking about where we wanted to move our SEM programs, we were looking at the opportunities that we had. And multifamily housing is one of the more challenging audiences for capturing energy savings. Given that there's 23 million North American households that live in multifamily apartments and condominiums, we think that $3.4 billion a year could potentially be saved through multifamily SEM, through energy management. And there really are not a lot of programs geared towards this important opportunity. It's a hard to reach audience, and it's also more complex. So the way that the energy bills are set up, the owners and the tenants, there's just a lot of players involved. And so it's a pretty complex set of opportunities. But given how big the opportunity is, we felt like it was an important place to move into. And in addition to that, we are finding that in 2020, the opportunity is growing. These graphs show the increase in energy usage that we have seen just since the pandemic. Clearly, more people are at home. more people are spending a lot more time in their space. And then consequently, we've seen some significant bill increases. You can see these two graphs, they're coming from energy monitoring software. They're showing us the increases in the summer bill, according to the metro area on the bottom there. And then to the side, we're seeing the increase in midday usage and also just daily usage. And the average across the United States is about 22% increase in residential usage. So it's a growing opportunity. The bills are getting bigger. And even after this pandemic, we suspect that there is going to be, there's going to continue to be more people working from home, more people spending more time in their space. So I think that it's just going to get more important to be focused on this. So with our focus on multifamily SEM, we have been able to partner with a company called Milepost, and they have run a couple of small pilots for multifamily SEM, and we have worked with them and licensed the materials and the program from them, and have taken the pilots and looked at what we can learn from those pilots. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over a couple of pilots, or I'll go over those pilots for you, show you the results, talk about what we've learned and how we've designed the multifamily SEM program to really create something that I think can make a significant impact. So there's been two pilots with two different clients, and that incorporates 20 different multifamily properties and over 4,000 residential units. The element of the pilot, right? Remember, SEM is focused on a holistic approach, and so we have a number of elements that we are going to be focusing on in that pilot. There is the Energy Star Portfolio Manager benchmarking. So we're going to start out with benchmarking the properties and really give them a baseline so that they understand what their areas of improvement are. We use Energy Star Portfolio Manager so everybody gets a score. We're all on the same page, and we can really look later how that score has improved. We'll do an energy scan, which is really just an audit of this space, an audit with improved focus on behavioral operations and maintenance changes. Typically, audits don't focus on that. They focus on capital and equipment changes, equipment upgrades. But these energy scans, they really focus on operations and maintenance changes. And so we'll do a scan of all the common areas. Think the commercial areas, right? So we're going to look at the multifamily unit in terms of any common or commercial space. And then the next piece is the engagement of the residents. So one key element of commercial and industrial SEM is employee engagement. And employee engagement means all the people in the organization that might be using energy at work. I really see this as a obvious synergy between commercial and industrial and multifamily, which is, in this case, the residents are the engagement that we need to do. So we are going to engage them through monthly flyers, through tenant engagement activities, to try to help them understand their opportunity for energy efficiency. At the same time, we're going to engage the operations and maintenance staff. We run workshops with them, 2 seasonal workshops. We have training materials that we give to them so that they can understand the energy use of the facility and understand the changes they need to make. Throughout all of this, we're going to track their energy usage and their savings through an energy savings tracking model. There's a normalized energy model. These are statistical models that we do, and we provide that model to the participants so that they can see the changes they're making. That is a key feature of strategic energy management. They need to see the effects of their change so that when they go to make more changes, they'll know that they're actually saving energy. And then finally, we add a little bit of fun and gamification by creating energy challenges amongst the properties and seeing how they do compared to each other. We are, it's co-opetition maybe. So they're actually helping each other through the process, but also being able to see how they're doing next to everybody else. So these pilots had some interesting results, and so I'm going to go through a couple of different quotes that came out of the pilots that were run. So one thing that we always ask is what they were doing before they decided to go into SEM. So how did they manage energy before they went through their SEM program? And what we hear a lot, and in this quote that you can see on the screen, what this person said is that they really didn't manage energy at all. They didn't think about it. They didn't think about the effects around the choices that they were making. They didn't think about how to improve their energy efficiency at all. And so now, after they went through the program, they really are able to manage their energy, to look at energy as a manageable cost. And then the other thing that we asked is how their outlook on energy management changed from the beginning of the program to the end. And again, what we found is they expressed that it created a new awareness. Sustainability was something they always cared about, something that they knew was good practice, but they really weren't aware of the type of changes that they could make. And so once they understood that, they could see what a big difference managing their energy could make. The picture on this slide is an example of the type of resident engagement posters that might be included in a multifamily unit, giving some examples of actions that the residents can do, trying to inform the residents and prominently featuring that poster in the common spaces. So another question that we'll ask is, what results did you see? What were the results? And what we hear is that there's improvements in the expenses. There's an improvement in their energy bills, but even more important, perhaps, is improvements in non-energy benefits. So in this case, they said they have fewer maintenance calls. So if any of you have worked with multifamily spaces, saying that we can get fewer maintenance calls for their people is a huge benefit. And so, really what that means, what that shows us is that the HVAC systems, the common systems are working better. They have been optimized. And that is why that there's fewer calls for the maintenance staff. And that frees up staff time and resources. And it's just good all around. And then another question we ask is if it was worth it. So SEM is a great program that has a lot of benefits, but you have to engage in it. It's only as good as what you put into it. And so, we like to find out if they think it was worth the effort that they had to put in order to get the, in order to get the savings and the benefits. And overwhelmingly, we found that the multifamily unit or the multifamily companies said that the pilot was worth the experience. They really felt that SEM worked and gave them very bite-sized, manageable approaches to making their energy, creating more energy efficiency within their organization. And so, so just like our other SEM programs, so just like the commercial and industrial SEM programs, we found that the multifamily SEM programs provided a lot of benefit to the organizations. But how did it do in terms of numbers? We saw that the pilots did save energy. There was 3 to 6% energy savings that were realized in the first year. Those were evaluated and acknowledged. And I think that that 3 to 6% was really focused on the commercial side of the commercial meters. And so we also saw that the residential savings wasn't as much as the commercial savings. And so this comes back to this lessons learned. What did we learn through the pilot? And one thing that we learned is that resident engagement is tricky, and we need to focus more on it and work harder to get that engagement to really up the savings. We only found about 1 to 3% residential savings. But that's not bad, and there was a fair amount of savings coming out of the pilot. So, I consider that a success. We saw that there was an average increase in Energy Star ratings. That average was about 32%. 32% increase in Energy Star scores for the properties over the course of the year. And that was really exciting. As far as the engagement of the property staff, we surveyed them post-pilot, and 100% of them agreed or strongly agreed that now they know more about how to save energy and what the best ways are for their organization. So again, that's a very strong result in the pre-post surveys. We also saw that the program had a high net promoter score, 8.38, and 4.68 out of 5 average satisfaction rating from the residential participants. So it was high. It was a high customer satisfaction program, and the people that went through it felt like it was worth the effort. And the other thing that we did is we asked about the materials that were provided, and that's what you see on the side there with those percentages, is what percent of the folks that went through the pilot found each of these components to be very effective. And no surprise to me, the workshops and the operations and maintenance workshops and the resident workshops were really the things that people felt were most effective. It's so important to teach and be present in the in the teaching in order to get folks to actually make changes. The least effective was the workbook itself, and I think that goes along with this idea that you can give as much information and literature to people as possible, but unless you're actually spending time working with them, you're not going to make the impact. And so we're using that information in order to improve the offering. And so that continuous improvement, it brings a new design to the program that I think is going to be more effective. And the number one thing we found is that residential savings is not as robust as we would like it to be. And so we are going to include a virtual turn down using our new virtual tool, our stream tool, that I think you'll hear more about tomorrow in the forum. And so we will do we're looking to include a resident engagement virtual tune up and turn down. So this is just using the stream tool to residents to have them walk us through their unit and give them some suggestions around what they can do to really just reduce their bill right then. Turning down their thermostat, looking at their plug loads, that type of thing. And so we think including that little bit of touch with the residents is going to increase the savings. The other thing that we wanted to do is make sure that the plans that each organization creates a plan to mitigate effects of staff turnover. We found that there was a fair amount of turnover in these organizations. And so planning for that, succession planning, understanding that energy efficiency needs to continue even after that star energy champion leaves is important. And so making sure that's part of the program, that planning for staff turnover is part of it. We want to start the engagement activity to understand all incentives within the organization. So one of the pilots was using had low income housing and low income multifamily units. And what we found there is we had a harder time getting residents to engage because they didn't see the bills or understand their energy usage. And so that can make the incentive less to change the way they use energy. And so we have to try a different method to get them to change the way they're using energy. So understanding all of the stakeholders and how they're interacting is important. And so that's also added in as kind of one of the first things we're going to do. And then persistence strategy, which we have in all of our SEM programs, but just ensuring that we can have savings in year 1, 2, 3, 4, and beyond, up to, as long as they keep changing what they're doing, we'll see savings. So given all of that, we created a unique SEM program that we feel is going to be really important for engaging multifamily units. It's focused on behavioral changes, operations improvements, facility maintenance, including that in-unit virtual assessment, and engaging with the vendors and the contractors of that multifamily unit, and then also bringing attention to other utility priorities, things like electrification or load management or demand response. So, bringing in those aspects. One of the neat things about SEM is that we are consistently meeting with these facilities and talking to the people on a very regular basis. We usually talk to them at least once a month. And so we are able to bring up more of the priorities of the utility to these organizations, and really work it into their plans. And we think by applying this model to multifamily properties, we can save between 3 and 6% energy based on the results of the pilot, and then also kind of our estimations based on the changes that we've made. This would be low, no-cost strategies and engagement. The next pilot I want to talk about that's being run right now in Michigan is community SEM. And so, what is community SEM? It is a traditional commercial industrial SEM, but really focused on smaller communities and focused on creating this sense of energy efficiency within that community. So we're going to focus on more making sure that our participants are very geographically located, and also that we're pulling in private sector, public sector, different folks that are already engaged in community action within these kind of smaller suburban cities. And when we were looking at that opportunity, we really thought one of the great things about SEM is it creates this culture of energy efficiency, and if we can do that within a community, that we can create a shared community experience from SEM, and that could also benefit by the promotion of residential programs. It could create opportunities for learning within the community for high school or college energy interns, which we have in a number of our programs, which trains up high school kids or college people in order to, in the energy efficiency world, and just, I think indoctrinates the youth in energy efficiency, which is good in my book. And so when we were looking at this opportunity, I was looking at a few statistics. I'm an engineer, so I really like numbers. And so I thought it was interesting that 7 times more Americans live in small cities than in large urban cities. And actually about 2/3 of Canadians live in small and suburban cities and outside of those large urban cities. And not only that, but that sector has been growing a lot. So there's been 16% growth in population in those suburban and small metro communities since 2000. And the growth in the Canadian suburbs and small cities is 5 times higher than the urban areas. And then just thinking about the small businesses that we have, there's actually 40 million small businesses in the US and Canada, and that accounts for 99.9% of all US businesses and 98% of Canadian businesses. So this is a big market. It's a big group of people, and maybe a little bit harder to get to because they're not packed in this dense urban area. So we thought it was an important thing to move SEM out of the more urban areas and into the communities. So I want to introduce Avery, who's going to be talking about this pilot that we're running in Michigan with SEMCO. Over to you, Avery.
Thanks, Keri. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining. I'm glad to be joining. Thanks, Keri, for having me and the CLEAResult team. I am a regulatory affairs program specialist at SEMCO, Energy Gas Company. Just a little bit about SEMCO. So our makeup, we have just over 300,000 customers, natural gas customers in Michigan. And we service a vast area of rural and suburban Michigan. So we're in the UP. We also service Southeast Michigan, what we refer to as the thumb of Michigan, along with some Western Michigan. So we have a diverse territory that is mainly rural and suburban. So to go on to the pilot, we had some thoughts back in January and February about what our pilot strategy looked like for the year. And as part of that, we had run a commercial industrial SEM program in 2018 in our Holland area in conjunction with an electric utility. We did realize great savings from that. The cohort delivery was valuable, and we found that the participants really enjoyed the program and found great benefit out of it. Well, thinking about that model, generally the low to no cost energy savings are the hardest to get, even though they should be the easiest to get. So we wanted to apply that to schools, nonprofits, hospitals, municipalities, and test the hypotheses if we can generate more economic development in our smaller rural and suburban areas, if we can achieve those low to no cost energy savings and stimulate future project activity. And I think that piece is important for our programs overall, but it's also important for the continued investment in energy efficiency. So increased enthusiasm brings those additional projects. I think knowledge is power. We all know that, but we have to have the knowledge in order to apply it and turn that into something. So that's why I think these strategic energy management programs are very important, is you not only get the tools you need, but the knowledge that you need in order to what we refer to as smart energy use. We call in Michigan our energy efficiency programs energy waste reduction programs. And I think that's a meaningful term because it highlights that we're looking to reduce energy waste. So to be smarter. And we always are looking for ways to boost satisfaction for our EWR programs because we offer them to all of our customers. And as Keri mentioned earlier, these customers overlap in the residential and commercial industrial sections because oftentimes business owners and employees of nonprofits are also homeowners and renters, and they know people who own businesses, and they may have multiple jobs. You don't know. So there's lots of impact from these programs by reaching the right customers. And I think what was important and some of the points that are highlighted on the side of the slide is that we want to differentiate this program and pilot from the traditional SEM program that we did in the commercial industrial sector. And I think that has a lot to do with who we recruit, how we recruit, and how they participate. So going on to the next slide, there are some metrics that we're following for this pilot. As always, when you're administering a program, you have specific goals that you need to reach in order for it to be a success. And part of that goal is energy savings. And I think at the end of the day, the energy savings not only helps us as utility reach our goals, but it also helps the customer. And I'll talk about a little bit the cost savings element and the timing of this and how that was so important. But we're hoping to claim 2 to 3% of our gross gas savings from these customers in this program, along with measuring what their satisfaction and engagement is, and increasing the C&I projects, which could consist of not only the commercial industrial, but the small business side as well. I think a key piece of SEM that is really important in the program is the energy charter. So really declaring and recording the goals of the program for the organization. Well, in this case, it's not only for the organization, but for the community that's participating. So that's one of the metrics that we're tracking as well. Also, the increased C&I projects in our core programs at SEMCO is also going to increase the investment into energy efficiency and the contractor work. So contractors and trade allies are key and pivotal to all of our programs. But that is a metric of if we're reaching success in this program. So why did we choose to target communities? I'm going to talk a little bit about the timing of this pilot with the global pandemic. So we originally decided to target the small to mid-sized customers with municipalities, school buildings, community buildings, nonprofits, small businesses, and key community members during the January-February timeframe. This was before there was any shutdowns or budget cuts as a reflection of the global pandemic. So this was an idea that derived, but I think before the pandemic, but increased in importance after. Many of these customers are resource constrained. Their budgets cover the key pivotal functions of what they do and the services and or products they provide. They're not necessarily able to have the investment, capital expenditures, the budgets to do some of these larger projects that traditional energy efficiency encourages. So after the pandemic and after the economy started opening back up and different sectors of the state started reoperating, we felt it was more important than ever to recruit these key players, get them involved, and help them achieve their energy savings and cost savings. So we have started recruiting in June, July, August. So we started recruiting. We are currently recruited with a great group, which I'll talk about a little bit. But really, I think what was important during that time of recruitment was to ensure that we were reaching these key players. And a lot of times during what we would have traditionally hoped the K through 12 schools would have participated heavily in this program, they were going through a complete overhaul of their traditional model, and they weren't in a place to participate. So that was a challenge in itself to lose a key player, but we decided to push past that and continue to recruit for the program. So we have leveraged several avenues in order to recruit these customers for the communities pilot, and that would be engaging with our local Chamber of Commerce, also Economic Development Alliance, and leveraging all of that media in order to get those key players involved in the game. We also are using our current relationships to find those opportunities. So I think that, as I called out, it was very difficult to recruit K through 12 schools. But if we proceed to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about the areas that we were able to recruit, because a part of this program that's very different than our traditional CNI SEM was that we were not meeting in person, right? That has really been limited due to the global pandemic. So actually an advantage to this is that we were able to recruit two communities. The Port Huron area, which is the area that I am from, and we were able to create a group there with a community college, our community action agency, a hospital, and then a key player in the industrial side, an automotive plant. And then on the west side of the state, we were able to recruit another community college, a hospital, and a school district. So we really had that great mix of customers that are resource constrained, typically may not even they don't have the traditional energy champion, they don't have even necessarily the facility staff to support, but we were able to find those key players, maybe in their accounting department or a maintenance staff, to be able to act as an energy champion and to participate in this process. So because of all that, I say we plan and hope, because we are in the pilot now. We are not, now that we've recruited and we've kicked off and we've gotten the key players, we're hoping for the opportunity to save significantly. Minimally, we hope to achieve 2 to 3% reduction in energy use, which that is very significant for some of these facilities, because, as Keri mentioned earlier, a lot of these facilities aren't even aware of their current energy use, and these small modifications that they would not have previously had the knowledge to implement are going to show on their monthly energy bills, which is a huge impact for them. And then also the cohort delivery, where all the meetings are now digital, but they're all meeting online. They're all talking about their experience, what projects they're working on. They have varying levels of experience with programs. So that works really well with this community focus. So the focus on communities and SEM complement each other greatly. So I think that as a result of the global pandemic and the need for businesses to save money and save energy, this is a great time to offer this program. Although time is a commodity that most of us wish we had more of, it still is a time where people are looking where they can save, where they can conserve. And this program is going to offer that to these customers. Also, it's just for SEMCO, it's a great opportunity to partner with these organizations, show our support, These customers participate with no cost to them. And then we are able to build our project pipeline and realize that incremental energy savings in our core programs. So overall, it's a great program. I hope that we find that we not only meet all of our hypotheses, but exceed our goals in this program. And I have confidence in the team that we're going to be able to do that. So thank you. I'm going to pass it back to Keri for questions.
Great, Avery. Thank you so much. Okay, so feel free to put questions into the question box. And it looks like we have the first question here. It's how persistent are the savings after the first year for multifamily SEM for the pilot? So the pilots are brand new. They really haven't been done for a full year yet. So it's hard for me to say what the persistence of the multifamily SEM pilot is. I can talk about the persistence of our traditional SEM savings, because that is a pretty big topic of conversation in the industry, given that the savings is typically low, no cost behavioral savings. And so persistence tends to be a topic of conversation. And we find that especially if, if we're only working for a customer for 1 year and we only have a 1-year program, and then we stop working with the customer after that first year, then the savings will persist about 3 years. And so we'll have a measure life of 3 years. If we continue to work with that customer after the first year, help them through continuing their energy efficiency journey, then we usually have a measure life of 5 years. And so most of our programs have a 5-year measure life. And I would suspect that the multifamily SEM would also have a measure life like that the persistence would continue as long as we are continuing to help them, with their energy savings. Next question. I don't have any more questions. So if you have any more questions, please feel free to drop them in the question area, and we can answer those questions. Otherwise, I guess we can be finished. Okay, it's coming up. Okay, so the question is, are there any multifamily property types that SEM does not work on? So the answer to that is also, it's hard for me to say, since the pilot was 20 properties, but however, there are a lot of different types of multifamily properties, and like I said in the presentation, figuring out all of the structures and all of the players and all of the incentives involved in each multifamily property is really important in order to be able to save. And so we have worked with the multifamily properties that have, say, 1 meter for the whole facility. We have some that each unit has its own meter, and there's just a lot of different structures to multifamily properties. And so similarly to commercial real estate, which we work a lot in SEM with commercial real estate, is that every kind of property has its own nuance. And so we have to work with those organizations to understand how best to fit energy efficiency in their organization. And so we will do the same. We do the same with multifamily. Really understand the structure and try to fit energy efficiency into that organization.